Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Simpsons Bart's Nightmare, brought to us by Acclaim for the Super Nintendo. Bart's Nightmare is one of my most nostalgic Simpsons games, and probably the one I played the absolute most back in the day, though I was never able to quite complete it, due to one extremely tough level. Bart's Nightmare is a little bit different from other Simpsons titles, where your main goal is to collect 8 pages of Bart's homework in order to complete the game, and you're graded on the amount of score you're able to get while collecting those 8 pages. Of course, usually in a game like this, I don't really care that much about the high score, though it is a bit more important here just for that overall ranking, though the ending doesn't really change up, other than the Simpsons family's expressions towards Bart at the very end of the game, which you get no matter whether you complete the game or if you end up getting a game over. The way that the game works is basically you're in Bart's dream, and your goal is to find the pages of the homework as they blow down the street. Jumping onto a page will allow you to select from one of 2 doors. We're going to start off with the very hard area, and that is this Indiana Jones-esque part. Basically, you have to move your way through all these blocks. There's 4 layers to them, and if you land on one that's too low, there's fire on it, you end up falling. If you fall, it's done, and you have to try to find another page and attempt to do it again. If you're killed by Maggie's pacifier in the background, you're done and get taken out. And overall, this just ends up being extremely frustrating of trying to manipulate these blocks so you don't end up falling down. A lot of times you have to go back a few steps in order to get a platform to rise, landing on the right one so that you're able to continue on, and if you accidentally screw up, you can end up in a dead end where there's no safe spot to go to. Also, Bart's whipping is a bit difficult, as each of the face buttons ends up whipping in a different direction instead of just one button to whip in all directions. The key thing, though, that allowed me to finally complete the level was knowing that if you hit R, you're able to scroll the screen over, which will activate the Maggie traps, and this is the only way that you're able to really complete this whole area, at least as far as I've been able to find out. As a kid, I never knew this, and for some reason never figured it out, and because of that, I was never able to beat this level, though I could easily beat all the rest of the stages in Bart's Nightmare. This area is broken up into 2 parts, though. Here is part 1, and once you complete it, you move on to part 2. Now, if you end up dying in part 2, when you come back here, you automatically start at part 2. Part 2 is a bit tougher in that you have these green devils that appear as well. They can't be whipped, and they will instantly take you out if they end up hitting the blocks that you're on, so you have to deal with them as well. Collecting the eggs will net you bonus points if you want to go ahead and try to get them, but for the most part, my goal is just to try to survive and get through, while keeping ahead of the Green Devil and making sure that he disappears before attempting some of the trickier areas, like when I have to stop and manipulate the screen with the R button, like here, in order to get Maggie to keep spitting out those pacifiers. Here we get another one to activate, and then we kind of have to do a little bit of backtracking, just enough that we can kind of get these blocks to kind of go up and then go across this area here. Keep going to the right, and now we have one more of the Maggie things in the background, taking out this devil, which they kind of spawn at random intervals as far as when the devils spawn. It's not a key spot. The eggs always appear in the same spots, but that's not the same thing when it comes to the devils. Here I'm able to kind of jump a couple of ones back, and this allows me to raise a few platforms I need in order to finally land safely and complete the Indiana Bart part of Bart's Nightmare, and we got 2 of the 8 pages already. Now, the way that the pages end up working, though, is some of them are like this one, where you have back-to-back of the levels in order to get both pages from that type of gameplay. Some of them only have one level for you to complete. And then other ones, like the Itchy and Scratchy one, you have to complete both levels separately, which is a bit annoying that you can't just go into the other one. Now, when you're on the main hub world, you're basically jumping around, avoiding the mailboxes, the Jebediah Springfield heads, and then you have a whole series of other things, such as the grandma that will kiss you and basically just tick you off. By doing so, you end up gagging, but she's actually important to bring you back out of frog form. If you see the fairy Lisas running around and they can actually turn you into a frog, the only way to become back into Bart is by finding one of them grandmas in order to kiss you. Finding our next page here, we're going to go into the purple door, and now this one's a bit weird. You're basically dealing with germs. You have to pop these weird germ guys, ones with spiked helmets and ones that throw little grenades, bombs. The ones with the spike helmets do end up knocking you away, but they don't kill you. Whereas the bombs, if they explode on top of you, it's an instant death and you're teleported out and you're going to have to find another one of the pages to come back in, making it really difficult. Your goal is to pop a bunch of these guys in order to get the page to appear above you in a force field. Now, every time you end up blowing up one of the enemies, you have the Smiling Joe Fission mascots of nuclear power that show up, and you have to make contact with them, and that will send them towards the force field, slowly eradicating it until it's gone and you're able to grab the page. So just keep popping these little guys, pretty much like Dig Dug, and eventually you'll be able to free the page, grab it, and move back to that hub world with now 3 pages intact. Now, the order of the levels you may do them in may be completely different than what I end up doing them in, since you have the choice of a door each time, and which ones you end up getting changes up each time, so you're never quite sure which of the ones you're going to end up getting when you find a page. Now, there's a couple of ways to instantly get a page to spawn, though a lot of times you just kind of have to keep jumping over enemies and trying to just take out things until eventually that page ends up showing up. But if you end up spinning a watermelon seed at the TVs when they show up, the walking TVs, that's an instant way to get one to appear, but it only appears the first time you take out a TV. And the same goes for when you find the bullies, like Jimbo and Kearney, who end up showing up and kind of taking you in the opposite direction of wherever you want to go. If you use the belch item when you're able to find it, which is a soda can, you're able to instantly get rid of the bullies, and this will also get a page to spawn. Now, as far as getting the pages to spawn every other time, it's kind of a crapshoot from what I've noticed. You also have Blinky the fish that shows up and you can jump over him and you end up getting these pillow icons on the top portion of your screen. Now, when you're Frog, like I mentioned before, you have to find the old woman to kiss you, and the other kind of nuisance is you have the saxophones, which have music notes that come out of them. If the music notes hit you, it reverses your control for a period of time. As well as you have Principal Skinner show up, who ends up dressing Bart in like his dress clothes, which stops Bart from being able to move very quickly. Your movement slows down a lot, and the only way to get out of those clothes is by jumping in the mud puddles when they spawn. Now here, we're going to go into the next door, and we're going to be doing the Bart Zillah part of the game. This is another one that's broken up into 2 parts, but you can do them back to back. Now, this is a little bit difficult. Basically, you don't have a health bar, but it takes about 15 hits or so in order to defeat Bart Zillah. And in fact, you don't even see him die or anything. The game just fades out if you take too much damage. Your goal is to take out as many of the enemies as possible, and all of the controls do different things. You have buttons that will shoot at the monorail in the background. The other button will shoot the laser straight down at the street itself so you can take out the tanks. You hit right on the D-pad in order to fire the fireball straight out in order to take out the helicopters. You have the other button to fire lasers straight out to take out the oncoming planes. And then you can also hit down on the D-pad to fire a fireball downwards in a diagonal direction, which will hit the helicopters as they're scrolling along the bottom portion. Trying to master this whole kind of control scheme takes a little bit. There's a lot going on. With every button doing something different, a lot of times you're going to find yourself pressing the wrong button when you end up then taking damage. Also, you'll notice when you destroy a building randomly, which only happens from time to time, it's not like a thing you can just force to happen. Basically, if a building's in your way while you're walking, you're going to automatically kick it, in which case you'll destroy everything on screen, which sometimes can be a lifesaver, that is for sure. Basically, you just want to keep on going. You're automatically walking. You can't move Bart up and down or anything like that. But eventually, you're going to have this little radar thing appear, blast Bart with a laser, and that will complete part 1, getting us page number 4, and then takes us to this part where we have Bart trying to climb up a building. If you fall off the building, it's instantly done, so you want to make sure that the screen as it's scrolling doesn't end up going up too far. You end up falling too far down, and you end up getting knocked off of the screen. You also, while going up, of course, are dealing with all the citizens dropping stuff on you. Marge shows up as Mothra, to knock you back down the building a little bit. Now you can avoid her by climbing up the sides. You have those kind of gutters on the left and right sides. But if you stay there too long, an enemy shows up and ends up blasting Bart away, so you can't rely on going on there for too long. You can also outrun Marge if you really hit up on the D-pad. Like if you hold up on the D-pad and move quickly, you can outrun her. When you make it to the very top, though, you're going to find King Kong Homer at the very top, and now you have to use your radioactive move. When Homer punches, it instantly takes him out, transforming him back into normal Homer, and you grab the next page, and we're back out on the street again. Once you start to exhaust the automatic page spawns, things slow down a little bit in the game. You can also, of course, run out of health during this portion. Your health is represented by the Z's on the top portion of the screen. It's kind of weird. Every time you get hit, you'll lose one of the Z's, and if you lose all of the Z's, then you end up basically waking up, and thus the game ends up being over without Bart finding all of the homework. Jumping works for the most part in this game. It's not perfect by any means, and hit detection is never the greatest. You kind of get used to that whole kind of jumping, where if you jump really quickly again, you're able to kind of be able to consecutively jump over enemies. But a lot of the time, if you're too close, you want to back away from an enemy and then try to jump over them. Also, you'll notice basketballs from time to time, and those give you a skateboard if you jump over it, making you go really fast for a period of time. Of course, you can jump over enemies that way, but there's all these cracks in the street that just ends up making the skateboard crash. So a lot of times I don't even bother doing that. Now here, I've already been walking for a while, so I'm trying to get a page to spawn without having to use the bullies to do the automatic page spawn. I was trying to get one to spawn organically before wasting that last automatic, and that's why I'm able to grab this page here. Now for this one, we have two doors left, the blue door and the yellow door. The blue one takes us to Bartman's level, and here we have a series of flying areas where we have to work our way through dealing with enemies and deal with several bosses along the way. You have a set of lives at the top portion of your screen, and you lose health really fast if you're not careful. Enemies, especially like the missiles, lightning bolts, and the bosses themselves, can do quite a bit of damage to the point that they even have a lot of instant death moves. So while you have 3 lives at your disposal, and this area isn't particularly really long, it's still pretty difficult, especially your first times playing the game. This also is probably some of people's favorite ones of the minigames in Bart's Nightmare. If you're somebody who's enjoyed this game or hated this game as a kid, which one of the minigames did you end up liking the most? This one was one of my favorites for sure, along with the Itchy and Scratchy one, which is why I usually save them for last if I'm replaying the game. Now here we have to deal with the twin sisters dropping bombs from the hot air balloon, throwing them down at us. We're basically going to try to move in between them and the balloon, like getting off to the left or right side of it, and attacking as much as possible. You can't attack straight up. You can attack in a diagonal up direction when you move in that direction. It's a little bit weird. It takes a bit of practice to kind of get used to the firing of the slingshot. After we deal with them, Sherry and Terry's done, we move on to Barney here on a purple-pink elephant type creature that shoots out stuff in its trunk. Barney also burps and causes nuclear belches that can end up damaging you. Pretty easy fight, but you want to try to keep a little bit of distance between you and him and just mash the attack button when he shows up on screen so that you're able to deliver those hits. Now, the next 2 bosses, you can either defeat them, you will of course get more points if you do so, or you can just avoid their attacks, and if they run out of attacks, then you're able to continue on. So it's up to you really how you want to approach the battles here against Smithers in the Blimp. Smithers moves up and down, firing out missiles when they kind of lock in on you. He can fire from off screen, so sometimes you can't even tell when the missiles are coming your way. Now, you can move up and down to avoid the missiles, or straight up attack the missiles using your slingshot. It can be a bit difficult sometimes to hit them, but if you're able to do that, you'll save yourself some headache and the fight will be over, because Smithers just ends up running away when he runs out of ammo. The next Smithers fight, which is the next fight after this, is also the same way, where we have to dodge missiles from him, and if he runs out, he just goes away. But before that, we have to fly through a series of nuclear clouds, nuclear waste clouds. If you run into these clouds, they hurt you a lot. They drain your health really fast. So you want to try to do your best to fly in between them, which is easier said than done sometimes. Usually I end up clipping them just a little bit, especially in some of the tighter areas. You also want to make sure that you take your time watching out for the missiles. You'll also notice I travel a lot at the bottom of the screen. This gives me a better eyesight on the missiles as soon as they end up spawning, and usually allows me to easily miss them. Now here we have the rematch against Smithers once again, just trying to stay enough distance away from him, moving a little bit up and down to kind of get the missiles to appear and to be able to hit them. It only takes one shot from the slingshot to destroy the missiles, but you have to make sure you're able to hit it. Once he runs out though, Smithers runs away again, and now we move on to the next part here, and we have one last boss to go, which of course is Montgomery Burns and a fighter plane, which is a bit of a difficult fight, but there's a decent strategy that I've found over the years that works pretty well for it. Be sure to grab the little items that Apu drops from his magic carpet. They end up giving some of your health back if you're able to get it, but it gives you just a very, very tiny bit of health back. In the background, you'll notice the plane kind of go by to the right, and this means the fight has begun. Basically, all you want to do is get enough space up and then move downwards every time Burns spawns. You'll see what I'm able to do is kind of just manipulate by moving up and down, and constantly with the down motion, firing out a bunch of attacks at one time, so that when he appears on screen, he runs directly in to the projectiles I fired, and then he goes off screen with his guns missing me. The guns are not an instant kill though, they don't do a whole lot of damage, thankfully, so this fight isn't too bad, especially if you kind of get this strategy down of just maneuvering either diagonal downwards or then going back up and then doing it again before he ends up appearing, so that you're able to keep delivering those hits. Once he's done, we have page 6, and now we have only 2 more of the pages to collect, and they're both for the Itchy and Scratchy levels of the game. And unfortunately, though, you have to do them both separately, which always annoyed me just a little bit, considering you could do the Bart Zillah ones back-to-back, and you could also do the Indiana Bart ones back-to-back. Thankfully, though, I still have one more instant spawn for the pages if I'm able to find the bullies and use my burp ability on them. Also, from time to time, you'll see an arrow appear when you end up getting a question mark item. The arrow will point in the direction of wherever a page is supposed to spawn. At least that's what I think it's supposed to be doing, trying to guide you towards a better location of where a page potentially could end up spawning. I also find it kind of switching up direction every once in a while, like if you're walking left for a while and nothing spawns, try going right for a little bit, usually that ends up causing it. So here are the bullies. When they kind of grab me here, it gets the page to spawn, and now I only have 2 choices to pick from. I only have a yellow door and a yellow door. Now, the Itchy and Scratchy levels work similarly to the Bartman levels. We have to deal with a series of enemies and take them out using a couple of weapons. The default weapon is the hammer, though if you get the better weapons, you'll automatic downgrade to the hammer if you take any damage. A lot of the enemies here can instantly kill you, including this missile-launching Itchy, so make sure that you're on the top portion of the screen right near this table, like all the way up as far as you can go. This will allow you to avoid the missile from Itchy and be able to take him out. The flamethrower Scratchy is also a pain in the butt to try to deal with. Here, though, we grab this weapon, and this weapon is much better, the fire extinguisher-like weapon. You can actually hold down the fire button, and you'll just keep firing. The same works with the hammer, but it's really slow. This and the Plunger Gun, which is the best weapon of this type of game, ends up being really useful, just holding down the button for attack and just standing in place, waiting for the enemies to come to us. Sometimes you will have to manipulate a little bit and move just a tiny bit in order to avoid some of the enemies. Mostly the Itchies with bazookas may cause a little bit of problems, but if you have the Plunger Gun, you fire so fast that enemies are not able to usually get the best of you and attack you. So here with the Plunger Gun, you want to do your best to keep a hold of this weapon throughout this part. You do not want to lose it, because it makes the next part that we have to do right after this really, really easy if you have it. You'll also kind of get used to playing it. Every enemy spawns at the same kind of locations or the same order every time. Whether they're on the left or right side sometimes varies, but they will always be in the same order. For this last part in the kitchen, go all the way to the left, stand about here. You may want to stand a little bit closer to the right side of the cabinet, just a little bit closer to the sink if you want. Gives you a little bit more space to hit. But just stand here and hold down the fire button. If you just do this, you're not going to be able to get hit by any of the enemies. There is a rare chance that one of the enemies, especially the itchies with the giant knives, which are an instant kill by the way, they can sometimes break through because the timing between you and the attacks is just enough where they could sneak on through. That's why I recommend being a little bit farther over to the right than I am. But overall, very great strategy. Just stay in there and take them out. And this is the last part for part 1 of the Itchy and Scratchy levels here. Once you take out all the enemies, the page ends up appearing, and then we go back to the street one last time to try to work on getting page number 8. Once back here, now I'm going to try to do my best to get this page to spawn relatively quickly, but it's still going to be pretty annoying. Starting by going over to the right, I want to try to become a frog. I found that becoming a frog will sometimes help you as far as getting the pages to spawn. It could just be dumb luck, because I really do think it's completely random when some of the pages end up spawning, but I found that if I become a frog sometimes, I'm able to kind of get that page to finally end up appearing. Here I'm watching out for the saxophone. I don't want to accidentally reverse my controls, but after I get hit here, the page just ends up spawning. I guess maybe taking damage caused that one to spawn. I really don't know all the ins and outs for getting them to spawn every time, but now we move on to the last level, the last game of the game, and this is another Itchy and Scratchy part. Start off by heading all the way over to the far right to grab your plunger gun. Unfortunately, you can't stand just here. You can take out a few of the killer vacuum cleaners, but eventually you're going to have to go over to the left side. When they stop spawning, I think it's usually after 4, move over a little bit to the left side back towards the piano, and then stand about here, and then you can start taking out the enemies again. Be careful of the flamethrower Scratchies and the bazooka Itchies especially, trying to make sure you deliver all the hits to them. Once that area is done, we move on to the second part here, which is back in the kitchen. Now, this area is identical to the last one, except you have these bubbles that spawn from the sink, which are pretty annoying. Stand about here. This will give you the ability to hit the bubbles as soon as they end up falling from the left sink, and you can easily turn around and hit the ones from the right sink. Just make sure you mostly focus going to the left. None of the normal enemies will spawn from the right. They're always going to spawn from the left side, just like we've seen before. So this way we can take out all the Itchies and Scratchies as they try to come towards us. So only turn around for a brief moment to hit the opposite bubble when it gets close, and then just keep focusing your attacks on the left side. Once you've taken out all the enemies here, we move on to the next part, which is back in the house itself. We're just going to move a little bit over to the right to watch out for the eyeballs from the picture frame in the background, and then stand here and just wait for the enemies to kind of come to us. Try to do your best to keep your weapon for this part, and then the next part, which is the last area that we're going to have to go to. Overall, it's just kind of memorizing the enemy order so that you're ready. Not a whole lot of enemies in that third part there. When you spawn here, just stand exactly where you are. Don't grab the hammer. Instead, just kind of wait for a bunch of the vacuum cleaners to come towards you. Itchy and Scratchy will then start attacking with the flamethrower and the bazooka. Right after this part, though, we have the boss for this particular area. It's a very, very easy boss, but all you have to do is go past the furnace, grab the fire extinguisher, and then stand right here. Make sure you're up against the ceiling and to the left right against the furnace. Also be sure that when you're attacking, when the furnace is closed, you'll see that you're doing damage. Like, you'll see a little hit thing go off on the door. That way it works. That means it's working. Just stand here. It'll take a long time to drain the health from this, but you're instantly guaranteed, as long as you hold down the attack button, you're going to destroy all of the little spawns of fire that shoot out from it, and be able to keep delivering hits to the furnace door there. And that's it. That's all you got to do for this part. Like I said, it's a bit boring, but very, very easy to do. Like I mentioned, it'll pretty much take forever, but once this is taken care of, if this is your final level like it is mine, you'll be able to grab the 8th and final page and then sit back and enjoy the brief ending to Bart's Nightmare. So, there you have it. That's Bart's Nightmare for the Super Nintendo. Like I mentioned, the only real difference is the reaction of the family as far as we get the AA+ for getting a higher score, and that's really all there is. Now, there are a few ways, like at that fire spot there, you could move a little bit so that you could hold down the attack button and just keep earning 100 points per fire kill, because that area never ends, you're never kicked out of it, and if you're not attacking the furnace, then you'll never defeat it, so you could just keep killing the fire over and over again if you really want to build your score up really high before finishing up, but that's like the easiest way to manipulate the scoring in the game. Overall, Bart's Nightmare is one of those games that I played an absolute ton of when I was younger, but could never quite figure out how to beat it. I never knew about the Indiana Bart thing holding R in order to scroll that screen to get the Maggie statues to go off. I kept always getting hit by them. I never knew why, no matter what I ended up trying to do. Also, the game Virtual Bart is another one that I played an absolute ton of when I was younger. I rented it many, many times for the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, and that's one I'll be getting to down the road for sure. And after the credits finish up and we see Smithers kind of fly by, the credits just kind of loop back and you can keep watching them for as long as you want. But with that, guys, it's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.